You sure you have yourself at the right angle?
Well, I don't know.
I'm going to just tell everybody what you were doing there as I was sitting here waiting to get started. You and NASA were having a little chat about which was your best angle and which way you should go, where you should put the microphone.
It was for the best angle for the viewers.
Exactly,
it wasn't for my personal glorification.
Yeah. So the viewers
which is already no. It's well. It was a humble consideration rather than a.
Well, I was sitting here with the microphone jammed, and I thought, well, I'm not getting involved in this.
Well, NASA obviously felt that the viewers aren't as interested in seeing your face as mine, so you'd have to take that up with NASA.
Did. I need to speak to both of you off air after this, right? Now, do you ever read this thing a load of times, and if you sat down to do an exam, you'd get about 40% of the exam?
I do, unfortunately,
this is where I'm at with this, but. We are talking the Kinahans, and we have them basically being brought up in this massive DEA, Drug Enforcement Agency, sort of sting. They're being discussed as, along with sort of the Sinaloa cartels and the world's biggest drug organizations, by a crew in Canada who are essentially working as fixers for everybody and putting them all together. But the Kinahan name is there, I mean, in blazing technicolor, amidst a plot to export fentanyl and precursor chemicals for crystal meth, which is, I find extraordinary because we haven't really had them mixed up with that before.
No, so this case came out as part of a DEA operation into a guy called Opinder Singh Sian.
Right, try that again.
So Opinder Singh Sian.
Try again.
Shian, is that what you're saying?
Joke.
What? Well, Opinder Singh Sian, right?
Sian.
Sian.
You could call it yeah, okay, call it Sian. Go ahead.
We go with Sian, right?
Yeah.
So, it is an incredible operation. And I suppose what you're seeing is the international aspect of the DEA. So what happens is this guy, Sian, he's basically somebody who looks after the transport of drugs for criminal gangs. He's a Canadian. He's previously, back in his earlier days, survived a couple of hit attempts. He has links to one of the motorbike gangs, but basically he's an international criminal. And the DEA have an office. They obviously have offices all over the world, and they have one office in Ankara in Turkey. And they have a confidential informant, as they're called by the DEA, but an informer basically. And this informer tells them this guy Sian has that there's a Turkish gang that are looking to smuggle methamphetamine into Australia, and they've made contact with this guy Sian. So the confidential informant is told, well, the DEA are going to set up a fake agent who's going to pretend to help. So this guy, Sian, meets with the confidential informant and this fake agent.
Whose code name is Queen.
And they have a meeting in the US. And during that meeting, Sian tells him who he works for. And he basically says, he names the Kinahans by name. He says he works for them in Canada. And he also works with Mexican cartels. So this is all recorded, and, it all features later on in a case because he was busted last month. And when you're arrested in the US, you're effectively charged. But once you're charged, all of these documents come out. So you have this 40-page document really describing how international drug trafficking works. And Sian is told that this fake agent can move drugs through ports in the US, and he gets this amphetamines to go from Turkey to the US, and then it's meant to move on to Australia. The DEA are obviously embedded in this operation the whole time, and instead of they seize the drugs and they export to Australia fake drugs, so they swap them, which is incredible. They send them to Australia. They have GPS trackers on it. The fake drugs go to a house and then they arrest everybody. So Sian is describing really his business throughout the whole thing. And that includes, at one point, he's describing getting, he tells the undercover agent that he's going to get these precursor chemicals for fentanyl from China to the US.
For meth, is it?
To create fentanyl. So there's these precursor chemicals. They basically, it's not fentanyl in its final form, but it's the chemicals that are needed to turn it into fentanyl. And yeah, he describes who he works with. He says he works with some mafia gangs in Italy, and the Kinahans are right up there. Now, it's not the first time you've had Canadian gangsters.
Yeah, so Canada basically is a huge territory. North America, it's obviously more significant than we previously thought. Obviously, it has its own market.
Yeah.
For the likes of meth and fentanyl. They would be American-used drugs. We don't see a huge amount of fentanyl or meth in Europe as of yet, although the warning signs are there that it could be sort of starting to be pushed into the drug market. But you've Canada obviously has its own market, but it's almost looking as if it's being used as a global
I think
shipment route in the same way Ireland was with the meth that was discovered in Cork that was on its way to Australia. The big takeaway here is that Australian market, where drugs are worth, often cocaine, will be 4 times the street value of here. So even if you're getting the drugs from a country like Canada, which is not, is first world, you're still going to make a phenomenal amount of money if you can land it into Australia.
Yeah, and I think what you're really seeing is that, like, this is how the drugs business is working internationally. You have these logistic brokers, really, like this guy Sian is accused of being. They're hired by drug gangs. In this occasion, it's a named drug dealer in Turkey that's very notorious in his own country. His name wouldn't mean much to us. Rather than him trying to move those drugs to Australia himself, he goes to this guy, Sian, and he says, can you take charge of getting it? I'll give you the drugs in Turkey and you have to get it to Australia. And in that case, that's what that guy, Sian, does effectively.
And what's he sourcing in Turkey?
The methamphetamine is coming from Turkey.
So it's been made in Turkey.
It's been made in Turkey, or possibly being made in Asia and brought to Turkey. But it's a Turkish gang that are trying to get it. And obviously there's a big Turkish expat community in Australia in particular. So what you have is these logistics guys. Now what you really find out is that the Kinahans are, like, because it's said in the DEA documents that the Kinahans are part of this network. This operation was put in place in June 2022. Obviously, the DEA are deeply embedded in these networks. The DEA and the FBI have previously spoken about another Canadian criminal with links to the Kinahans. And really, I suppose, in some of the international press, in fact, most of the international press are connecting the DEA getting an undercover agent and obviously a confidential informant at the very top of this transport network. They're connecting that with the MV Matthew. Now, that's not connected explicitly in these documents because this guy, Sian, has been arrested in the US and he's been charged with drug offences that occur in the US. But clearly, you can see that the DEA, and who've had a huge long-term interest in the Kinahans that we've spoken about before, they have made deep inroads into it. A number of months after, we know that they have an agent in this logistical transport. Obviously, the MV Matthew is caught. Now, whether they're linked or not, I don't know.
But it's not so long after.
It's not so long after.
That's clearly being, that's been tracked from.
That's been tracked from Dubai. We heard that there's during the trial.
It's being tracked. A lot of it's difficult to know exactly what moment that intel comes in. Is it when it's leaving Venezuela? Do they allow it across the waters to see where it's coming from? There's certainly a very robust kind of policing team in place in Ireland waiting for its arrival. But yeah, the idea of that this boat just was behaving a bit strangely off the Irish coast isn't it?
No, I think
muster when you have the kind of the level of information's coming in. You mentioned the previous Canadian we spoke about, a guy called Ryan Wedding, and he was this 43-year-old former Olympic snowboarder. And it was a court, the prosecutors actually put it into the court documents, into the court papers, that he was a associate of the Kinahan organisation. That their names were coming up in Canada is just so, it just means they're so global. I mean, they are literally up there with the top operatives.
Oh, yeah.
You've got the cartel selling the drugs. You have the Kinahans having the money to purchase and transport them in mother loads across the world. And then they take investments from everybody else.
Yeah.
But you see how little you have to do when you're that high up. One phone call.
Yeah, and totally. And this you can see how the drugs business is laid out here. That and it's very similar to the MV Matthew in that it was described in court. The MV Matthew was there was an Iranian nexus to it, but what it really said was there's these cell structures. So the people moving the drugs, for example, are not the same people as the people purchasing the drugs originally or distributing the drugs. That there's these cell structures and there's people taking individual charge of one branch of this operation. And obviously, in the case of the MV Matthew, it was being directed by Dubai. People were hired to move them. Somebody bought a ship. All of these things, I mean, huge investments. And, there's not many drug cartels that are capable of buying a ship,
a mother load. And the thing is then who takes the financial hit? Because the Kinahans' modus operandi has been to unburden themselves of the total hit. So they will have an investment in it. But as do, say, the Iranian regimes and various other people. So you can be damn sure if the drugs go missing, the last people to lose their investment will be the Kinahans.
Yeah, and
they're controlling every aspect of it, really, aren't they?
They're controlling it now. I suppose they're not controlling it in Ireland like they once did. At the very pinnacle of their control of the Irish drugs market, they had obviously the international trans-global ship smuggling networks. But then when it landed in Ireland, they also had a network of workers to distribute it. And they really did take an interest in every level of the drugs business. Now the Kinahan Cartel distribution network in Ireland has effectively been dismantled. But you can see they're still operating at this much higher level, which is really the movement of those drugs across continents.
And that was happening, if you go back to your timeline on it, it's really around 2014 that they start making those ambitious moves to form that European super cartel, cocaine super cartel. They're headed towards Dubai and they're going to start becoming, up there with the top 10, drug organizations in the world.
Yeah.
And it's at that point, I think the decisions and that road is already paved out to them when you have the annoyance, essentially, which was trying to be taken on by the Hutch organisation when they carried out the Regency Hotel. It was literally an annoyance to them. But they had already become so powerful there. Ireland, they've no interest in that anymore. They've no interest in Ireland. It's too small fry for them. They were kind of leaving a lot of that behind. And I always wondered, were they leaving, was Daniel Kinahan leaving Gary Hutch behind before he had him shot dead? Was that those friendship bonds? Was Daniel Kinahan going to take everybody with him up to that top level?
Yeah, and I think the super cartel, as it's described, had a peak, I suppose, 2014 to 2000.
I think, as far as I can see, I think it was being established around then, because it's around then that you see the murder of Samir Bukharin in Benahavas in Spain, and he would have been the rival Dutch Moroccan mob. So that allowed Taghi and El Rico and the rest of them take over their country, I suppose, network. And then 2014 that happens, and then you can just see a few little things that don't make sense at the time. Even the murder of Hatchet Kavanagh and that it's almost like a cleanup then in Spain.
Yeah, and certainly the ports in Belgium and Holland become really, really important to the growth of that super cartel. And they had absolute control over those ports and people in them. And again, in this case with Sian, you hear the undercover agent poses as a relative of somebody working in the port, and that's what they're offering him. So that becomes a huge part of that super cartel story, the ability to corrupt people in these ports to arrange shipments on container ships, which is still one of the primary routes. But certainly in recent years, as some of that control, I think, has weakened and the police have caught up on it gradually, the motherships coming on ships like the MV Matthew seems to become more and more important.
It's interesting they talk about this during I suppose what's picked up during the conversations by Queen, the DEA agent, is that they prefer to go with a mothership because there's a lesser chance of you getting caught by customs, presumably.
Yeah,
but you have one chance to get a load in rather than, I suppose, giving customs a chance to say you broke that down into 20 different loads. You have, they see it that you have a greater chance of getting your product seized.
Yeah, and also I suppose the rise of synthetic drugs and how important these things are going to be in the future of the drugs business. But yeah, it's still, the movement through ports is still the way in which the big money is to be made.
I can't understand why you would want to transport fentanyl if you can make it in the country that it's, I think crystal meth in particular, maybe we'll take that instead of fentanyl, because I think fentanyl is a much more complex or somewhat more complex chemical structure. But the crystal meth, and you see it all the time, they're literally stirring it up and they're making it up in the Andes and all the rest of it in these jungle laboratories. It's somebody needs to be taught how to make it, but you could pretty much make it anywhere, even though it'll be smelly. You've got Australia and you've got the vastness of the outback and all the rest of it. I don't understand why you'd be still looking at transporting it.
Well, because I suppose there's bigger money to be made if you've produced it yourself and are selling it on as a final product. The same way, if you can, if you're selling your Nike runners and they're made up and they're in the box, you're going to make more money than if you're selling off the parts for somebody else to make them. The fentanyl is, the fentanyl tends to be made in Mexico for the most part, I think. And what they were doing was they were importing these precursor chemicals, as they call, from China. China, there aren't criminal gangs in China producing fentanyl, or there's certainly, it's become a very big political issue between the American government and the US government. So you can produce these chemicals for various good reasons, and they can be made in China and shipped in, and then the Mexican cartels produce the fentanyl for the drugs. But it's become a huge issue. I mean, Donald Trump is constantly going on about these chemicals, these precursor chemicals from China, in their trade talks and tariffs and all of that. It gets mixed in.
And I think the Mexican government themselves are requesting that, there's a stop put on the imports of these.
Yeah.
There's obviously fake companies been set up left, right and centre to import this stuff. I'm sure the precursors actually have
they have legitimate purposes as well. Like there are, it's where I don't know exactly what it is, and we won't speculate, but it's like there was always the same with methamphetamine, that you could have, if you remember watching Breaking Bad, they're always trying to get these other chemicals and they mix them together, but there are legitimate purposes for all sorts of, pseudoephedrine and all of that. It would be in regular medications. But yeah, it's a fascinating case. But I suppose really what it shows is, like, the DEA, but you're in America, like the Drug Enforcement Agency of the USA, they are all over the world, and they have an office in Turkey, and they're able to put together these really, really elaborate operations. And they have obviously honed in on the Kinahans as being the reason they're honing in on them is because they're certainly playing some role in the drugs trade in the US Now they may not be directly importing cocaine into America. I doubt they are, but they're certainly their network, and that's how it's described in here. It's a trafficking network, effectively, a global trafficking network where people, move drugs around everywhere, and that presumably has why they've drawn some of the attention of the DEA. We talked about Ryan Wedding. He's a former snowboarder, Olympic snowboarder from Canada. But again, if you go back to Ryan Wedding, even 20 years ago, he was mixed in with a Hezbollah cell in Canada, believe it or not. So even back those 20 years, those connections are in place. And yeah, it's like I suppose Dubai is like Silicon Valley for drug dealers.
That's what it certainly feels like these days.
Yeah.
I'm sure the United Arab Emirates Tourist Authority would be delighted with that.
Well, they can be
Silicon Valley for drug dealers.
Yeah.
No, I like it. I like it.
That's it.
That.
Yeah. I suppose I'll give it a go.
Thanks, Dan.
Thanks, Nicola.
I'm Nicola Tallant, and you're watching Crime World, a podcast about criminals, drugs, and the underworld in Ireland and across the globe. Make sure you subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you can be the first to watch all our latest episodes. You can also listen wherever you get your podcasts.